Get your heats, and we gon' do it like this. I got bad to strong. I got one.
I got myself a 40, and I've got myself a shorty, and I'm about to go and stick it. Go and stick it. All right. All right. Wheelie back selector. Wu-Tang. I'm sorry. If you've been listening since 7 a.m., you can tell I've been watching that Wu-Tang biopic on Hulu. And I've been enjoying the Wu-Tang wet dream, the Wu-Tang fantasy. My wife keeps telling me, because we watching that Wu-Tang story, and she keeps telling me just relax and enjoy it. Now it's taking me back because I was living in New York in that era, in the early 90s. Y'all was grimy in the early 90s, far behind me. It ain't hard to find me. So I was there. And I was deeply into hip hop. In fact, when I graduated high school, I had a few options. I could have moved to Chicago and gone to DePaul. I could have, of course, went downstate. But I chose, when I got accepted into SUNY, State University of New York in Brooklyn, I didn't even consider anywhere else. And a big part of going to New York City was it's the birthplace of hip hop. And it was everything I expected it to be. Like, I'd be roaming through Harlem eating a veggie or a gluten patty, and then Freddie Fox would just walk out in the middle of the street. Like, damn, there's Freddie Fox. I got to see MC Shan battle KRS-One at Madison Square Garden. It was everything I expected it to be in the era of hip-hop. But again, this is 91, 92, 93. I couldn't call it now. If you're looking for a hip-hop experience, I don't know where to tell you to go. But I stayed in my studies. I did graduate. I finished school. But I was there. So the show really takes me back. The low sweaters. You know what I'm saying? 8-ball jackets, Jabot jeans, and 40 below Timbos. So I'm enjoying the show. I don't know how factual it is. I don't know how real RZA's being with it. All the gangsterism and stuff. Most of these music cats. Because I know some industry insiders. Shout out to King Dita. I know some industry insiders. And most of these music cats, they chronicled things they saw going on. But they didn't participate. The musical dudes were the nerdy dudes. Most of the real shotters, the real gangsters. But anyway, shout out to RZA and the Wu-Tang for putting out that, if nothing, engrossing and entertaining Wu-Tang bio show. I don't even know the actual name of it. What is it? Wu-Tang Saga? It's just mad interesting. They nailed ODB, whoever the casting director. They nailed ODB. And even though the dude that plays RZA on the show doesn't look much like RZA, he's got RZA's mannerism and disposition down. Those young people in that. I don't really like the Method Man too much. The dude who plays Method Man doesn't really capture. But Method Man is like, if you've ever seen him perform, he's like a magnetic dude. It's kind of hard to capture people sometimes. I like the little gummy cat that plays Raekwon. It's a fun show. So if you ain't seen it, go check it out. I'm enjoying it. And, I'm going back to listen to the whole Wu catalog. My favorite Wu album of all time was Liquid Swords by GZA the Genius. I think that is the best, most quintessential Wu-Tang, and I think GZA gets overshadowed by some of the larger personalities. It's kind of like NWA. MC Ren was the best MC in NWA, but he got overshadowed by the other cast that had larger personalities, but not quite the skills. So, hip-hop became more about personalities and celebrity than actual skill long before today. But I still like it. The GZA character, again, I think they could have done better casting the GZA. But all in all, this is Bro Diallo show. I'm the Grinch of Pan-Africanism, so I'm gonna find a way to tear it down and player hate on it. But I really like the show. I don't know why my mind's going to all the things that I think could have been done better, because overall it's excellent. 2 black fists. 5 black fists. Good show. entertaining, historically accurate. I don't know. I don't know. It ain't what I saw. That ain't what the impression I got from those days in Brooklyn. That cats was doing Tech Nine drive-bys on projects. You know, it just, I mean, drive-bys was a West Coast thing, but I could be wrong. I mean, Staten Island, I didn't mess with Staten Island too heavy. The cats had to come across on the boat for me to see them. You know, I was mostly Brooklyn, little bit of money making Manhattan, Harlem. I didn't mess with Queens too tough, you know, except, you know, I liked the music coming out of Queens back then, but Nas and Mob and all them. But, you know, Queensbridge just turned me off to the bridge. You know, the bridge is over, turned me off to Queens back in the 80s before I could even find New York on a map. Anyway, if you're a hip hop head from the 90s baby like myself, if you're a hip hop cat and you want some type of trip down memory lane, that's the show right now. Even better than that other show Netflix produced about the origins of hip hop, which, you know, I don't know, take it or leave it. But this Wu-Tang thing, if you a Wu-Tang, if you a hip hop head, bad boy era, you know, conscious hip hop 5%er era, the golden era of hip hop, check out the Wu-Tang. Anyway, moving on. Speaking on East Coast hip hop, Tekashi 6ix9ine, the moment we've all been waiting for, the songbird, has taken to the stand. And I just find it ironic how all these rappers, all these celebrities are mad at Tekashi for snitching. And just a couple of months ago, earlier this year, all these same rappers that are like talking this gangster talk, talking about the G code, talking about the streets and how to handle it in the streets and how to keep it in the streets, was all had they Martin Luther King on, all singing non-violence, stop the violence, stop the crime, we need to come together, what's wrong with us, when Nipsey Hussle was gunned down in the street on some gang street G code stuff. And I didn't see the G code. Everybody was on the media singing like a bird. Snoop Dogg did not say, hey, that's the code of the street. It happened in the street. Keep it in the street. Snoop Dogg turned to Snoop X. Snoop Luther King. Denouncing violence. Talking about the gangs must come together. They singing all this flowery language. When one of their own get killed. And when I say one of their own, I don't mean black. When one of their own, when I say that, I mean tax bracket. When a rich black person gets killed. Now, the true death, the consequences of this gangster culture, the consequences of the gangster music, the real life consequences, premature death, bullet riddled bodies, either death or crippled for life. And for every black youth that's gunned down and murdered in the street, there's a dozen black youth that are crippled for life, psychologically and physically traumatized for life. You come around the hood and you see these 18, 16, 17-year-olds remanded to wheelchairs, you know, blinded for life. Because most people that get shot every week, if you look at the Chicago statistics weekly like I do, they'll say 25 shootings and 7 homicides. So those 7 people are gone, but the rest of those brothers and sisters are psychologically and physically traumatized, injured, damaged for life. And even though the statistics come, we had these rappers come out like, what's his name? Chief Keef said, when I drop an album, the homicide rate goes up. And he didn't say that as a lamentation, as shameful. He said that to brag. He was bragging about that. So, I know they walk in contradictions. I know they don't make sense. But I think we don't just need to accept and drink down or swallow the contradictions. We need to raise the contradictions. We need to highlight, acknowledge, call out the contradictions. So, all the rappers, when they come out and say, oh, Tekashi 6ix9ine is snitch, we not snitch in the street. It's like you can't have it both ways. You can't be G code when it's poor black people being terrorized and murdered. You can't be G code when it's poor black people being hounded, harassed by militarized police. You can't call G code when whole economies of rural white America are built on the mass incarceration of black men and women. You can't call G code then, but then you want to call social justice. You want to cry about unity and truces and stopping the violence and giving up the guns when it's a rich black person that dies. And what's even more tragic than these rich, hypocritical idiots that come out and say that want to come to memorial service and want to stand arm in arm with Jesse and Sharpton and Farrakhan every time it's a rich black person, a black celebrity that gets gunned down, all of a sudden y'all want to be reflective, all of a sudden y'all want to call for unity, all of a sudden y'all want to gain truth, all of a sudden y'all want to question what's wrong with the black people, all of a sudden y'all want to talk about how you ain't coming to the hood no more. Even that little minstrel, what's his name, Kodak Black, said he was on his way to the hood the day Nipsey got shot, but then decided not to go to the hood. And N-O-R-E, the dude who names himself after a notorious drug trafficker and dictator, Noriega, the rapper N-O-R-E, said he's never coming to the hood again, never contributing to the hood again because of Nipsey Hussle's death. All of you who ignore the fact that on the day Nipsey Hussle was gunned down, 6 other black people were gunned down in that exact same community without a peep because they supposed to die. It's a wonderful book called Class Struggle in Africa by Kwame Nkrumah. And if you read that book, you'll see class struggle amongst and throughout the black community. That's classism, and classism is as detrimental as racism because classism erodes us from the inside and makes us vulnerable from racism from the outside. So, what do I have to say about Tekashi 6ix9ine? Nothing. I'm not a thug. I'm not a gangster. I am not a predator against my own people. I don't exploit my own people, so I don't identify with gangsters, with gangbangers. And shout out to Mars. He was on Talib Kweli's show, and he's one of the few black people that came out and said, prominent black underground artist, who said you can't be pro-black and a gangbanger because gangbangers target black people. They focus on black people. I've talked to gangbangers myself, and I say to them, I told you this is a legitimate conversation that I had. I said, if I wore blue through this neighborhood, you would jump me. They said, yeah. I said, but if the mailman comes wearing blue, the uniforms for the mailman is blue, y'all don't harass the mailman. I said every day landlords come through the hood and evict your mothers. The cops wear blue. I'm like, everybody, but they get a pass and I don't. They said, yeah. And I'm like, why? Why would you attack your own black people for doing stuff while you will let people, either black people that represent or under the protection of the system, or non-black people that come to our community that do harm? Y'all go out here and make money in the hood and spend all this money with the gas station owners who ain't black, with these guys come and sell us the what they call in fashions, a lot of these hood fashion stores, a lot of these hood boutiques that sell these overpriced sneakers, they go and get the either bootleg versions or the flawed versions that the major retailers don't sell. So they come to the hood right now and even back then. I'm like, all these people come to the hood and damage your hood, exploit your hood. The dude that come through to cut off your mama water, gas, her electricity. Y'all don't think, it doesn't cross your mind to step to these dudes. But me, I'm just trying to get back and forth to cross-country practice, to play rehearsal, get back and forth to school. I got to walk a minefield because of you. And they were like, because they not in the game. I'm like, I don't want to be in the game. How come these people don't even have to opt out? They're just automatically excluded from your predations. But I can't say, hey, I'm out of it. Leave me alone. And they literally, after the conversation proceeded, and I'm just trying to get the logic of a gangbanger, of a gang member, they told me, get out my face before I knock you out, little nigga. And so that was my final attempt to try to penetrate this irrationality of black on black predation. So I don't think nothing of Tekashi 6ix9ine. He is not on my radar. I'm working towards revolution to dismantle systems and institutions of global white domination. That's my arena. So am I mad that Tekashi 6ix9ine is snitching? Absolutely not. Is he snitching on revolutionaries? Is he snitching on subversive groups? Is he providing information on brothers and sisters who are in the community, trying to empower, trying to liberate? Is he providing information on anarchists, communists, socialists, Pan-Africanists, black radicals? No? Then I don't give a damn. Do I think he's bad? Yeah, I thought he was bad even if he didn't snitch. I think he's a scumbag whether he snitches or not. But I genuinely don't care. My attitude about Tekashi would have been no different than if he snitched, than if he kept it real. Than if he went and spent the rest of his life behind bars on some G code. I don't care because the G code, everything related to it, keeping it real or punk it out, all of that is subversive, erosive, and destructive to my people, so I don't support it. Let's say that Tekashi kept it real, and Shotty walked, and Shotty came back to the streets, and the non-trade Bloods were not blown up from the inside. What would they be doing in the community today, right now? And I know a lot of you middle class, I get so many middle-class black folks who never had to live in a gang community, who never had to navigate gang culture. When my grandmother would get me up in the morning, give me my lunch money, give me my bus fare, and say, now you watch yourself, boy, and have to run down all these rules, because I don't want you to die over nothing. You got to navigate, and you got to tiptoe through the minefield of the predatory police and the gang bangers. I'm not just speaking from speculations. I've had guns thrown up in my face. I've had guns pointed at my head in these streets. I've had to duck up under grimy ass cars. And you know, poor black people in the neighborhood, we don't have the money to maintain our cars. So everywhere you go in the hood parking lot, it's oil and all kind of antifreeze dripping under our cars. And I've had to roll up under grimy ass cars and lay in an oil puddle while a shootout or a drive-by waiting for it to pass. And people who've never been through that come up with this flowery language, talking about, street organizations. So, these street tribes, these young brothers, the gangs are our first line of defense. Bull crap, they are not our first line of defense. We got too many examples of black communities coming under siege, of black communities coming under direct attack from external racist forces. And who stands up? The church deacons, the old working man, the working stiff, what the gangs call the neutrons, the busters, the herbs. History tells us it's the common folks, not the criminals, that stand up for the people. The criminals do one or two things. They look at the calamity in the community and say, hey, what do? They say, how can I profit from this? Because gangsters have the identical mentality to capitalists. Gangsters are low-level capitalists. Capitalists are high-level gangsters. There is no difference besides the money and the tools at their disposal. That's why so many gangsters or pseudo-gangsters go on to be CEOs and run their own companies, because it's the same fundamental predatory mentality to run a Fortune 500 company than to running a gang. And it's the same outcome: exploiting people, harming people, robbing people, causing the unnecessary death and crippling and harm to people. Same thing corporations do, gangsters do. So I don't say, well, don't be a gang, go to college and become a CEO. That's not a solution. But anyway, it's just kind of annoying to me, all these people talking this G code nonsense in relationship to Tekashi 6ix9ine. As if you in it. No, I've never snitched. But I've never had anything to not snitch or to snitch about. I've never engaged in the systematic organized crime and systematic exploitation and predation against African people. I've never done that. So when the pigs come to me and say, what do you know? I can honestly say, I don't know nothing. Get out my face, pig. Because I don't ride with people that prey on our people. I don't rock with them. So yeah, I support the no snitching code, but the thing I hate the most about this stop snitching culture, because I support stop not snitching. I fully embrace that. But I remember, I have a historical understanding that stop snitching was about two things: opposition to our oppression and protection of our community. So if you knew somebody that was planning a slave revolt, if you knew somebody that was going up into the plantation house and stealing, if you knew a sharecropper during Jim Crow that was holding back some of his harvest, that was lying to his landlord about his yield, that was damaging some of the white man's equipment, if you knew about an employee of a multinational corporation that was stealing, taking a little something off the top, or that was maybe back in the day you had dudes working at these plants that would damage the plant. If the union negotiations weren't going well, they go and break the equipment. They go and hold up the line. They go and damage the shipping trucks. And they go to try to hurt the bottom line. And they want to be able to deny, we ain't done nothing. We're negotiating in good faith. But they doing their dirt. If you knew somebody that was plotting against a murderous cop, a racist cop that was brutalizing the community, and you knew a dude that was going to take it upon himself to neutralize that cop, that's what stop snitching was about. It was about opposition to our oppressors and protection of our community. Stop snitching was never about facilitating the predation against our own people. Pimps, drug dealers, sex traffickers, murderers, extortionists against black people. That was never about what snitch. So it really disgusts me. It really disgusts me from a revolutionary historical point of view that now the stop snitching culture has been adopted by the snitches. Because the original snitches in the black community, the Uncle Tom Sambo, who would run the massa and say, "Massa, they plotting a slave revolt." And the reason why the snitches would do that is because it was about their personal gain. They would put their personal gain over the collective betterment. So in the back in the day, the snitch was the one who would run the massa and say, they plotting a revolt. They plotting to run away. Massa, I know who's spitting in the stew. Massa, I know where they hiding the weapons. And they would come to that slave, that snitch slave, that thug gangster slave, and say, good boy, here's your reward. You get better clothes, better food, better housing. You get something, even though your people continue to suffer, you individually, or maybe you and your woman, or maybe you, your woman, and your children, and a few other people in your entourage. We'll bring them up to be with us, bring y'all into the house, and we're going to put more repression on the Negroes, the rest of them. Yeah, that's what the snitching was. The purpose of snitching during slavery was for an individual slave to elevate themselves over the collective at the expense of the collective. Y'all talk about crabs in the barrel. The crabs at the top are pressing down on the crabs at the bottom. You never look at it from that point of view. You talk about, oh, the crabs in the bottom pulling down. Get out of barrel, but if not stepping on the people under you. And y'all literally saying when you talk that crab in the barrel, say, hey, bow down and let Jay-Z step on your neck. Bow down and let these people, hell, Beyonce came in with a song, bow down, bitches. And y'all was, woo, yeah, Beyonce, yeah. Bow down, bitches. So you don't want me to say, hey, why are you stepping on my neck to get ahead in this system? When you shouldn't even be trying to get ahead in this system. We should be trying to break and smash the barrel. Maybe if we all work together to smash the barrel, we could all get out of it instead of you coming out the top and many of the crabs that get out the top of the barrel turn around and seal the lid. But anyway, beat that dead analogy. That's what snitching was about. In the days of Marcus Garvey, Barbara Wire, Bago Wire would go and snitch on Garvey. Well, all these black people, Garvey got more black people in his organization than anything. But I don't want to be a cog in the machine. I don't want to just work with my people. How can I get a quick ahead? The dude that snitched on Mark Clark and Fred Hampton, the infiltrators in the Black Panther Party. They had snitches and spies in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Back in the day, the snitch was the gangster. Because what do gangsters do? The gangsters have the same mentality as the snitches of the past. What can I do to elevate myself individually at the expense of the collective? And so when black people said stop snitching, their mind went to these thugs, these gangsters, these renegades, these black people who don't show unity and solidarity with the people. Those were the snitches. That now we think the gangsters are the snitches and the snitches are the gangsters. So no, I'm not surprised. The feds know. They always turn somebody. You think Tekashi 6ix9ine is the first or the last snitch coming out of black gangster culture? Even Malcolm X and the Black Panther Party said that when a lot of street people came in who never cultivated their street mentality into a revolutionary mentality, when we stopped cultivating these niggas and cultivating them into Africans, they're the ones that came in and ruined everything and messed everything up. We had a good thing, Malcolm said, till the gangsters came. So it's really annoying to me that y'all thinking, oh yeah, these street codes, that means keep it real. That means don't snitch. No, the street codes, they are the bastard offspring of the snitches. Anyone who says, I'm going to exploit my own people, I'm going to do collective harm for individual betterment, is a snitch. They come from that culture. It's the same objective. But y'all want to sit back, oh, Tekashi's snitching. Y'all want to be mad at Tekashi for snitching. I'm indifferent to Tekashi. First thing I say, well, yeah, he's snitching. Who's he snitching on? Did these people make any positive contribution to the just aspirations of African people? I have a very low bar. I wish my bar could be higher, but I don't want to just sit in the corner by myself like a madman. So I lower the bar. I say, if you want to be a black person that I have any type of connection, hold any type of solidarity, brotherhood, sisterhood with, you have to be a black person who makes a conscious, deliberate contribution to the just aspirations of black people. That's all I ask. You can define what that contribution would be. I don't even dictate that. That's it. And is he snitching on people? Because if he was, like I said, if he was out here turning in revolutionaries and freedom fighters and organizers and activists, if that's who he was snitching on, I'd be outraged. Like y'all fake ass outrage. I would be outraged. But I am not outraged. I am not upset. I don't think any less of Tekashi because I didn't think anything when he was pretending to be a real gangster. I have the same attitude whether you're a good gangster or a bad gangster. I have no respect for gangsters. I have no respect for gangsterism. And I have no support or respect for people who perpetuate concepts of gangsterism and predatory behavior against black people. Y'all could be guerrillas. So yeah, Tekashi 6ix9ine has taken to the stand and he snitched on Jim Jones and said Jim Jones was a non-trade blood. And everybody laughed, but now they're saying that they got recordings of Jim Jones giving orders to essentially assassinate 6ix9ine. So, and Cardi B. But y'all can play gangsters. And that feeds into, I'm going to have to come back to that, gangsterism and black masculinity. But let me touch on these other things. I got a few things to go. Oh, today, let me say, if you're in the city of Chicago, first of all, let me say shout out to the teachers union, shout out to the nurses union. The teachers union is in a very, very hostile negotiation with this new mayor. Remember, we thought, hey, we got a black woman, lesbian, progressive mayor. So she feels our pain. She can relate to us. And she getting in there acting just like the cisgendered heterosexual white men act. Representing the interest of the elites and dumping on the poor and working class people. So, when we going to stop with these identity politics? Politics that stop. When we going to stop personalizing politics? It's all about the platform. It's all about the policy. I don't care if it's a kangaroo that's running for office. What is your platform? What is your policy? What initiatives do you have on deck? And what track record can you demonstrate that you would adhere to it? So even though this woman had some great optics, a lesbian woman of the third largest city in America, it's a history, y'all. She made history. I don't give a damn about the first black, nothing. Let me not say that. I care about the first black person to collapse capitalism. Y'all want me to dance in the street, do the Holy Ghost dance over a first black? Show me the first black man to thwart an imperial military campaign. Who that? The first black man to shut down a nuclear weapons facility. Y'all want to talk about the black first. But Lori Lightfoot took the playbook from Rahm Emanuel, the Zionist, neo-fascist, neoliberal scumbag of a mayor who tried to cover up murder, torture of black people, who wanted to establish the status quo, who enriched himself at the expense of the city. Crony capitalist, bringing his brother in, paying him. But anyway, she took his playbook and she's sticking to the script. But some of y'all went to sleep because y'all feel that, her demographic. She's a black woman, so y'all pro-black. Y'all think, you see another black person, y'all don't understand this thing called treason, backstabbing. But I digress. Anyway, the teachers are in a bad faith negotiation with the city, with the mayor, and they're threatening a strike as early as, what is this? October. Early October. And I know some teachers. My wife was a teacher and a member of the teachers union before she went on to teach at the college level. She taught everything from middle school to high school here in the city of Chicago. And last time the teachers struck under Emmanuel, I was in the streets walking with the teachers. And it was a good experience. And I said to my wife, what are we doing? She said, I don't know. The mob knows where it's going. We're just going to go with this. So we're in the ocean of these militant unions. And the Chicago Teachers Union is one of the most militant unions in the country. Other unions, when y'all look at the Red State Rebellion, all those other teachers unions that were striking across the Dixie line, below the Dixie line, they were taking their inspiration from the Chicago Teachers Union because it's one of the most uncompromising unions. And I know King Dita, his wife, is still a loyal member of the Teachers Union to this day. So, hey, give me a shout. Y'all want me to come out there and put some more bodies on the line? We can come out there and march with the Teachers Union. I support unified labor, even though the racists have been sexist and racist and discriminatory AF. That's another discussion. But anyway, that's a union. But today, now this is mysterious. If you live in the city of Chicago, you want to avoid the University of Chicago Hospital. This morning at 7 a.m., the nurses went on strike. The nurses union went on strike. And so number one, if you do have some type of appointment or something with the University of Chicago, because they got outpatient, inpatient, trauma center, all kind of, if you do, you probably want to try to reschedule at least for the next 5 days, because the union went on a one-day is starting a one-day strike today, but the administrators have announced that they're going to do a 5-day lockout of the nurses, which is effed up, which is wild. And but again, you got to look at things holistically. But the nurses are essentially saying they don't have safe working conditions. They're working understaffed. They're not getting their materials. They have a lot of legitimate complaints. This ain't even about money. And I think it should be about money, because it is about money. But they say it's not about money. It's about having working conditions. And they said that, and I know I worked in healthcare for 13 years, and I've done more than my share of 24-hour shifts, where you work literally straight 24 hours, and you got an injured, sick, dying, cancer-ridden person laid out in front of you, and you're like, well, ding, 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 it's my time off. If there's no replacement, you can't walk away from that patient. You know, people don't stop getting sick because the workers stop working. Therefore, nursing staff, emergency staff like firemen, even though they're unionized, they have very, very strong limitations on how they can rebel. Because if food workers or even sanitation workers stop working, the public is threatened over time. But when firemen or actually when the police strike, crime tends to go down. Real talk. But that's another discussion. All I'm saying is, if you're in Chicago, you do have any type of scheduled exams or a checkup, you're bringing in your babies for vaccines or whatever, you think that if you are going to the clinics, to the outpatient clinics, to the emergency room, you probably want to reroute yourself. You want to go to UIC or Metropolitan or some other facility, at least for today and perhaps the next 5 days, because the nurses, as of 51 minutes ago, the nurses are on strike. I support that strike. I think they should have done it sooner. They put up with a lot. My son broke his knee skateboarding in the rain. So don't weep for him. Don't send me any condolences for him. Hopefully that was all on him. He was skateboarding in the rain after we told him don't skate, literally days after. She's like, hey, you're taking your skateboard. Don't skateboard in the rain. But anyway, my son broke his knee. And he went to the University of Chicago Hospital, because it's just a few blocks from us. And the nursing staff on the floor. Now, I'm going to be real, because even though I support the nurses, the OR nurses, I did not like them. I did not like they were trying to give my son opioids. I think I spoke about this before. They want to give him fentanyl and oxycodone. And we said, listen, we're going to really, really regulate and closely watch his pain, but we're going to do everything in our power to avoid opioids and narcotics as a part of his treatment plan. If he needs them, fine. And they were pushy, insistent, and they didn't really respect our wishes and what we wanted for our son. And when we had stepped out for 10 seconds, we came back, and the OR nurse was injecting him with fentanyl. And we know what fentanyl is. And so we made a stink like, listen, he gets nothing without our approval, our signing off. We had to make a stink. But when he left the recovery room and he was on the main floor, excellent care. These understaffed, overworked, under-resourced nurses, mainly black. I think only one of his nurses in the time he was in recovery but when he got to the floor, no complaints about the care. They kept us informed. They sought our approval. They explained everything before they did it. So, shout out to the Chicago, University of Chicago. And I don't know, I only interacted with a couple of the ER nurses. Not happy with how y'all do. And I let it be known, and let me not even say Dr. Mingo had a word with them, with the staff and the administrator, and just had to chickadee check them. So maybe that's why by the time we got on the floor and left the OR recovering guy, because he had to have a pin put in his knee. Hopefully that'll be a reminder to, he's not immortal or invincible, but he's fine now. He's off the crutches, full recovery. The doctor was very impressed and excited with how fast and how completely he recovered. So he's fine. He's fine. He's doing fine. But anyway, if he did have to have a few follow-up visits and everything was good, but like I'm saying, if you're going to be there. But here's something ironic, something you want to look at. It's funny because the University of Chicago Hospital is, of course, managed by the University of Chicago. And if you know anything about the University of Chicago, you got to know about the Chicago School of Economics. And the University School of Economics, ironically, is the economic system that is taught by the University of Chicago School of Economics is the very economic system that is driving down the University of Chicago. The women are literally protesting the very economic and management system of austerity, the market fundamentalism. So the ideology that is driving the nurses to have to strike is the ideology that was developed in the economics department of the University of Chicago. There's a book that breaks down this called The Lexus and the Olive Tree. I read the book. I don't advise that you read it. Thomas Friedman is the author. He is a madman. If you can get a free or PDF, but don't pay for this book. It's garbage. But it's frightening because in this book is basically a validation of You would think that it was an anti-capitalist book because it is a horrendous book. Because it is arguing for something that is so horrible, even though it's trying to argue in favor of it. It essentially can't really, it's only so much sugar you can put in on feces before the feces just soaks through and still starts stinking again. So in this market fundamentalism is essentially like you have to run everything according to market demands and market interests and market values. Or essentially, to simplify it, you got to run it like a business. And I'm sure you've met people that talk like that. Yeah, this is a church, but we got to run this church like a business. Yeah, this is a non-for-profit, but you got to run your non-for-profit like a business. Yeah, this is a loving relationship. This is a marriage, but you got to run your marriage. You got to run your family. You got to run your own life like a business. You are the CEO of your own company, which is you. Run your life like a business. I'm sure you've met idiots. I know if you live within the confines of the United States of America, you've heard this. You've been told this. You know people that try to live by this. And you run everything like a business. We even say we elect politicians who are businessmen because we want our government run like a business. I was living in New York. I was just leaving New York when Giuliani was leaving office and what's his name? Forbes. When they elected that billionaire businessman, Bloomberg. I get all these billionaire parasites. Well, parasite is a parasite. They all look alike to me, not Forbes, but Bloomberg. Forbes wanted to be governor. But when Bloomberg ran, they were like, yeah, we got a businessman. He's going to run the city and run our city like a business. So he got in, and what do businesses do? What is the fundamental idea of a business? I've ran a business, and a business ain't about your hopes and your dreams and your vision, and it's not even, business is about maximum extraction from minimal input. That's all a business is. You want to get the most out of it with putting the minimal in, and I don't care if you own property and you run your property like a business. You want to charge the highest amount of rent and provide the lowest level of service. You don't want to repair nothing. You don't want to put the good fixtures in, the good stove in. You want to pay the lowest amount for lawn care and all that. But you want to be able to charge them as much rent. And all a business is a day-to-day decision saying, how can I expend as little as possible? Spend as little money, pay as little labor, have as few workers as possible, but be able to charge and extract as much from this business. That's all a business under capitalism is. And the first mega CEO, celebrity CEO in America, Henry Ford, the Nazi Henry Ford, the anti-Semite Henry Ford said, I don't run a car business. I'm not in the business of making cars. I'm in the business of making profit. And he said, I regret the fact that I have to hire a whole man when I only need his two hands, where he fully objectified his labor force. They were nothing but extensions of the equipment. This all came out and was canonized and was legitimized and propagated by the Chicago School of Economics. And so you have to run a hospital like a business. So how can I, and what's ironic about running the hospital again, University of Chicago Hospital is a not-for-profit. It's a charity hospital. They don't pay property taxes. They don't pay taxes. The community supports this, but they still, you got to run it like a business. Like I said, if you ain't heard this, you ain't alive. You don't live in the United States of America. Everything is run like a business in this country. Even my sons, my relationship with my sons. I'm the boss. I'm the CEO. They're my employees, or they're the product. My family is a factory, and our product is two strong young black men, and we're going to manufacture and bang these men into viable production units and send them out to the world to earn. It's sick. It's absurd. But as I say, you got to run it like a business. So they're running the hospital like a business. What is their capital? Sick bodies, diseased people. What do you do with these sick, diseased people? You give them the least amount of treatment for the highest cost. So even if I need an MRI, I'm just going to send you in for a standard X-ray. Even though you need radiation and chemo, we're just going to cut your chemo in half and double up on the radiation, because radiation therapy is cheaper than chemo. Cost effective. When your child is sick, when you're sick, you don't want an accountant. You don't want a lawyer making decisions about your health care. People who can't tell a bag of saline from a bag of insulin don't know nothing about healthcare, but they are the chief decision makers. You don't want some bureaucrat sitting in an insurance office making decisions about your life and well-being. But guess what? That's exactly what's happening. Accountants, you don't want a nurse doing your accounting. You're not going to go to your doctor and turn your books over. Like, seriously, don't go to your doctors, even though everyone thinks doctors are such geniuses. But doctors have some of the highest rates of bankruptcy and some of the poorest financial behaviors of all high-level professionals in the country. It's the truth. I've worked with doctors for years. And every doctor, the routine is within 5 to 10 years out of medical school, they file bankruptcy. So, it's not a slight against doctors. That's a whole nother discussion. But you don't want to go to your doctor to have them to do your taxes. But you don't want to go to your accountant and say, hey, my child has renal failure. Well, let me think. What's the most economically prudent approach to dealing with this? Well, economically, just throw the child in a ditch. It'll be better for your bottom line. Throw him with a ditch and and throw some dirt on top of it. Abandon the child. Go find a healthier child. That's an economic decision. That's not a humane, it's not a just, it's not a civilized decision. But right now, hospitals are ran by lawyers and accountants, not by healthcare professionals, nurses, doctors, physicians, allied professionals like me. We don't run the hospitals. We don't make the decisions. They hand decisions. Every time I would come to work, they would have memos. Well, the new policy is this. And every day they're looking like, what can we do? Someone comes in with a hand injury, it's basically a PA, lateral, oblique of a hand. Well, we're just going to do the PA and lateral. And if you want the oblique, that'll be an extra or additional requisition. Because that way we can save 0.0003 cents per exam. And over the fiscal year, that would add up. And since we do 15,000 hand exams a year, we'll save $75 for this department's budget. That's how they determine your care. And yes, people will die. But that's what the accountants do. But then the lawyer's saying, well, if people die because they only get two, a PA and a lateral view instead of an oblique view for this injury, and what is it? Well, maybe a half a dozen people will suffer greater injury than otherwise would have. But we'll save money. And even if they sue us, we can stand to make $8 million, and the potential litigation lawsuits are $3 million, so it's a net gain. So since it's a net gain, let's screw the people over. And I know a young sister in law school right now, and they're teaching her this, and she's very upset because her father was injured in just one of these settlements where a corporation said we can put out a faulty product and we'll make so much money putting out this faulty product, and our potential or our liability for litigation is less than half of what we stand to gain. So it's a net gain, so let's put out this faulty product and injure people and kill people. And while she was in class, literally her father, the case study that was one of the victims, and she got really upset and said she cried in class, and she called me and was like, yo. And I'm like, yeah, it is what it is, I didn't really have any words for it. I know it's hurtful, but it's the truth. Your professor did not lie. I mean, he's not really, whether he was cold or callous, the truth is the truth. So this is how hospitals are being run. And so they saying, listen, if we just double up on the nursing staff or have nurses work double shifts, you got an exhausted, overworked, under-resourced nurse. Yes, some people will die, but out of the people who die, only about 2 to 3% of all people who die from medical neglect, only 2 to 3%. Most people just accept it and move on with their life. 2 to 3% sue for litigation. So screwing over the nurses, we can save hundreds of millions, and then we got to pay a couple of million in litigation, net gain. Let's do it. That is called market fundamentalism. And it is ironic. The nurses who are right now in the streets, they're going to be in the streets from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. The nurses right now who are in the streets, they shouldn't be marching around the university hospital. That's where they are. They're picketing outside the hospital. Listen, somebody get to those nurses and tell them, go over to the economics department. Go to the Chicago School of Economics and protest there, because that's the source of your problem. The administrators at the hospital, just like everywhere else, workers are being squeezed everywhere. It ain't just you educated professionals. The people at Burger King and McDonald's are getting the same treatment. Overworked, underpaid, dangerous conditions, limited resources. And your clients, whether it's a sick patient or a hungry family, the clients, we the public, get harmed by this. But who cares if people are getting harmed if you making money? Right? That's the same thing with the 9 trade bloods. Yeah, they getting money, son. They getting money in these streets. Who cares how many people they're hurt? Unless they hurt somebody who's rich. Unless somebody that's a millionaire like Nipsey Hussle gets hurt, then we got to slow it all down and reflect and then get right back to business. But as long as poor and working class people are being harmed, hey, we just fodder. We just human resources. We let them call us that. That's not even an insult. That's one of the most insulting terms I've ever heard in my life, and it's everywhere. You got to go to human resources. What? I'm not a resource. I mean, damn, wasn't it just 60 years ago black men were marching up and down the street with big signs on their chest saying, I am a man? Should have said, I am a resource? Y'all explain to me. But anyway, I'm spending too much time on this. I support the Chicago Nurses Union. Their cause is just. But if anyone can tell them, go march on the Chicago economics, because if you march on the hospital, you're helping the nurses who do deserve the help. But if you march on the School of Economics, you're going to be helping the world. Iran, shout out to Iran. I also support Iran in this conflict against the House of Saud, against the Zionists, against the U.S. imperialists, the neo-colonial forces out of Europe, the Mossad, the MI6, the CIA. I support Iran. Iran is a sovereign nation that is working within the UN treaties to which it is a signatory. Iran currently occupies no foreign nation, is currently not at war with any foreign nation. The United States is conducting at least a dozen open military actions and countless clandestine and proxy wars. The United States is the bad guys, and I don't support the government of Iran. I don't support the theocrats of Iran. I don't support the Ayatollah or the imams or any of the people who control Iran. But I support the citizens and the people of Iran and their right to sovereignty and their right to self-governance. And I see what they're doing. The United States invaded Iraq and set up a base. They invaded Afghanistan and set up a base. Therefore, they're literally on both sides. And then just to the south, they have Saudi Arabia, which is a satellite or proxy state, a proxy force of the United States imperial forces. Iran is being surrounded. They have a right to defend their integrity. They have a right to in their border integrity. So Iran issued a statement saying, if you attack us, we will retaliate with maximum force. Now, let me tell you something. The only reason the United States is not bombing Iran to this day is because Iran has the capacity to fight back. And Iran has some powerful allies in Russia and China. And even though Russia and Iran are under sanctions, they are still engaged with trade with one another. So the United States is not only an imperialist nation, it's a bully nation and a cowardly nation. So I am thankful of that. I'm not even condemning the United States for being a coward, meaning that the United States only invades nations like Haiti, like Honduras, like Afghanistan, like Iraq, like Somalia, like northern Pakistan. The United States, since Vietnam, has a history of only fighting against nations that don't have the capacity to fight back. The United States, since Vietnam, has not gone into any nation that it has evaluated or determined has the capacity to fight back. Now, that's their goal. But thankfully, the Iraqi insurgents, with the help of Iran, was able to fight off the U.S. imperial designs. And if you are a U.S. citizen, believe you me, don't support the U.S. empire. Even if you're a patriotic American, for whatever reason, I don't understand patriotism. I'm not a patriot, and I don't even care if I was in Africa and I was born and raised on my mother continent in an all-black nation. I would not be a patriot. I don't understand patriotism, loving my country just because a roll of the dice I was born there. You should always have things you support about your nation and things you're critical about. But just love my country. That's stupid. That's only indoctrinated people. Take those positions. But even if you're a patriotic American who loves America and want America first, and even if you're a MAGA head, you should be in strict opposition to U.S. imperialism. And even if you don't like the sand niggas, I know what y'all call us, or the foreigners, even if you're a racist, isolationist, white supremacist idiot, you should be against U.S. imperialism. And even if you don't listen to me, because I'm just, you want me to go back to Africa, go back and love it or leave it. You can listen to Pat Buchanan. Pat Buchanan is a racist. Pat Buchanan hates me and hates and thinks America is God's country, the greatest country in the world. But Pat Buchanan wrote a book back in 1999 called A Republic, Not an Empire. And this is a right-wing, racist, white nationalist argument against empire. Because leftists, communists, lefties, and right-wing patriots are all have the same conclusion that the empire is not good for the citizens of the empire. The empire only works for the people in the upper echelons. So you should not support the United States attacks on Iran. You should not support, you should say, hey, United States needs to come out. That's why Trump was really elected. Trump said he was going to end these wars. Remember, he hasn't ended one war. Not one conflict has he ended. But he said he was going to defeat ISIS in 2 weeks and get out of Syria, get out of Iraq, get out of Iran. He was going to say, hey, we're going to bring back all the Americans, close the door, build a wall, and lock us into our cozy little country. Now, that's an absurdist promise, and he's a con man, so of course he's going to say something he would never do and never could do. But there are certain elements of that are noble. But even if let's say, and for you left of center, you don't like Pat Buchanan because he's a racist, but you don't want to listen to far left radicals. You're practical. You're a centrist. You're a good Democrat. Then you got Chalmers Johnson. He wrote a whole series of books on anti-imperialism, and he is a middle of the line guy. He's like a Biden. He used to be a right-winger, and then he kind of woke up a little bit. He got woke, and then he went a little to the left, but not far. He's still a capitalist. He's still a patriotic American. He's still anti-communist, but he's also anti-imperialism. So I don't know how you're anti-communist and I don't know how you're capitalist and anti-imperialism, because Lenin told us imperialism is the highest manifestation of capitalism. But hey, y'all believe in the impossible all the time. Y'all believe y'all can fly. Y'all can touch the sky. I'm not that kind of person. I like to stay grounded in my analysis, and I like for my analysis to be consistent across the board. But you people who believe you can fight empire and preserve capitalism, go for it. As long as you're fighting empire, as long as you're doing something constructive while you do dumb stuff on the side. So, even if you're a patriotic American, you should agree with me to say I support Iran's opposition to the U.S. imperial designs when Iran said if we are attacked. And also, even if Iran bombed, which I don't believe, again, I don't believe the Houthi rebels, I don't believe the U.S. government, I don't believe the Saudi oil family, I don't believe anybody when they say that they bombed. I believe that the Iranian, again, this is my speculation, I believe that the the Saudi oligarchs bombed their damn self. That's what I think. Or they allowed for the Mossad or some other agency to bomb them. And then they bring out these, like, look, these are Iranian weapons. So what that they're Iranian weapons? That doesn't tell you anything. Guess what? All the weapons being dropped on Yemen to cause the biggest famine in the modern era, the largest famine ever recorded in the 21st century, they're all made in America. Can somebody go to war with America because the Saudi oil family bought $100 billion worth of weapons from the United States? So, and all the bombs dropped on Yemen say made in the USA. That's the only thing the United States still really manufactures and exports. But again, rabbit hole. I digress. Support the people. Any entity that stands against U.S. imperialism, I support. Bring the troops home, bring the resources home, bring it all home. To your home. America's not my home. I'm a subject of the American empire. That's how I define myself. And I'm not sovereign to this land like you other people with this fantasy playing. Y'all, I mean, listen. Once you hit 10, 15, 12 years old, time for playing cowboys and Indians is over. Real world. But anyway, keep an eye on that. Today's topic is toxic subjectivity. I've been talking about this issue of toxic masculinity. Anyway, let me just do station ID. This is Q4 Radio, AM 1680. You can find Q4 Radio if you're in the city of Chicago. Then tune into the AM dial. If you're outside of the city of Chicago or outside of the reach of our AM signal, you can listen at q4.org, which is my favorite way to listen because I can get it uninterrupted at q4.org. You can broadcast live on the website. Also, you can get the TuneIn app and iTunes Radio to listen to Q4. Please listen to Q4. Please support Q4. Some of the most diverse and all 100% independent grassroots broadcasting, progressive broadcasting, independent music, and independent artists. Q4 Network is thebomb.com. So that being said, also to support Bro Diallo as a person, as a particular show on that broadcast on the Q4 Network, you can go to diallokenyatta.com. You can become a Patreon and make regular contributions to help keep us on the air, which is greatly appreciated. Now, and also, part of the show, not the entirety, but a large segment of the show, I do broadcast on YouTube, and now I have set up Super Chat. Who was it? Chauncey? Somebody who told me to set up Super Chat. Everything I do, somebody told me to do. I don't know nothing, man. I don't know nothing about nothing. So if you see me do something, just say, don't even give me credit. Say somebody in that brother ear. Because when somebody said, yo, you broadcast on YouTube, why don't you set up Super Chat? And I'm like, Super what? Super Cat? Ghetto Red Hot? I don't know nothing. But somebody told, I believe it was Chauncey. He said, dude, do the Super Chat on your YouTube. You're doing the thing on the thing. So I did it. And people making contributions, I greatly appreciate it because we definitely need it. I'm here because of the support. I would not, real talk, son. I would not be here if not for the support. And if you ain't got the material means to kick in, Lord knows I understand what it means to have not. But if you could just take a moment to subscribe to the channel and or always share it. And I say share it with your friends, lovers, enemies, allies, homies, cousins, aunties, brothers. Share the show. Get the word out about the show. That is also, you become an engaged listener, an active listener, and a participant and a listener instead of more of a passive listener. But I appreciate all of y'all and everything y'all can do and have been doing to sustain the Bro Diallo show. This is us. I am because we are because I am. Now let's talk about this issue. Toxic subjectivity. And we're going to have to define terms because I see people like to run around with their notions and what they're saying and what they're not saying. First of all, when you call something toxic, by nature, anything that's toxic has to ill affect people around you. So something is toxic because it actually is actively or has the great potential to infect or harm others around it. So if something is just harmful unto itself, but it can't be transferred or it doesn't impact things around it, then it can be poisonous, but it's not toxic. until you consume it. So there could be a toxic food substance or a toxic or poisonous berry, but you don't really call a poisonous berry toxic if you don't eat it. Say that berry's poison, and you can just go around it. So toxicity means that there's some active agent in play that is causing it to harm others. So you can say, well, there's a toxic waste dump, and then it's poisoning the water supply and doing all these other things. So even though poisonous can sometimes be synonymous with toxic, when you call something toxic, you're calling something an active agent of destruction, an active agent of harm, an active vector of disease and damage and harm, death, injury, or even what do you call it? Delaying your actions. So if you are engaged in something toxic, it diminishes your capacity. Even if it doesn't kill you, even if it doesn't have anything that diminishes your capacity to work, to achieve your dreams, to work or combine with others, anything of that nature, that could be called toxic. And the reason I call this thing toxic subjectivity means something that's open to interpretation. If something's subjective, you can have 10 people look at something subjectively, and they'll all come, even though they all have the same exposure, they all draw different conclusions. And what is masculinity? Masculinity is actually quite subjective concept. Basically, masculinity is anything, any set of behaviors, jobs, qualities, characteristics that are attributed to men in a defined space. So what is masculine for a man in the United States is not masculine, identified as masculine for a man in maybe rural Kenya. So in the United States, farming is a man's work. It's a hardy work, salt of the art. I do farming. But if you go to some other society, agriculture is women's work. Women do the agriculture, men do the hunting or the building. When they first came to this land, women work, men don't. So it's considered in some cultures feminine to work the land, to till the soil. In other cultures, the most manly thing you can be is a farmer. Child rearing. In some cultures, the children belong to the men, and it is up to the man to guide and lead the children. In other cultures like this, tending to children is women's work. In some countries, working needlework and working with textiles and fabrics and making clothing, it's women's work. In other cultures, that's man's work. Men are the textile and the fabrics. The knitting and weaving is considered a manly job. So when you start to talk about something that is subjective, that is open to broad interpretation, that can be defined differently depending on who's looking at it, and also be defined according to what era you're in. There was a time when rappers was grimy, would wear hoodies, drink 40s, wear leather bomber jackets and big hoodie. I mean, one time I went to see Common perform. And this is in the summer. I was in Lawrence, Kansas, on the University of KU. And I went to see Common perform. And I had on tank tops, cut off jeans, and some flip-flops. And this dude came out with these baggy-ass designer jeans, these big-ass furry boots. Dude had on a hoodie, and on top of the hoodie, he had like a leather bomber jacket, and under that, he had like a Scully on. And I couldn't enjoy the songs. I couldn't even rap along with this dude, because all I was thinking is, man, he must be musty as hell. Like, when is this dude gonna collapse and pass out? What kind of drugs is he on that he could stand up under these hot stage lights? And you know how the rappers do all these hand gestures, all these aggressive hand gestures that rappers are so fond of, and not pass out. I'm hot looking at him. I literally had to go back to the bar. I don't even drink. I had to go get some virgin pina coladas just to cool myself off. But this is the 90s. Every rapper had to perpetrate. But if you go back and you Google Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, let's just try that right now. Google image Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. This is before the 90s. And you Google image that. And the first image comes up. These dudes got on tight leather clothing and tassels. One dude has cornrows, and the next dude got like a leather headband with a big ruby in the forehead. And in the next picture, this guy has he has knee-high boots on and a Speedo with a gold. And Grandmaster Flash got on spandex pants with a cowrie shell belt and a long perm, and the Jerry curls are just, I mean, it's making my screen greasy. And you go back and look at World Class Wrecking Crew, where the gangsta NWA, Yellow Boy, and they wearing lace and eye makeup. And these dudes, nobody called these dudes punks. I was there. And remember, like I said before, there was a time when Gucci and Louis Vuitton was your grandma's clothes. My grandmother wore Gucci and Louis Vuitton. I was wearing Fila. I was wearing, British Knights. I was wearing Jabot, cross colors. But Gucci and Fendi and a Gucci belt, that was something your auntie wore. But then these guys started coming out with Dapper Dan, Louis Vuitton, Fendi, and all this stuff. But those used to be old lady fashions. And Grandmaster Flash, if you look at it from the 70s, they look like the disco cats. They look like Kool and the Gang and Earth, Wind, and Fire. So what would be called masculine back then for a dude to have braids or a long perm and all that, that wasn't considered feminine. That was considered showmanship. That was considered flashy. That was considered hot. But hey, wasn't nobody questioning them dudes' sexuality. Maybe the old cats, maybe the cats that listen to Nat King Cole. The cats that listen to Nat King Cole would probably look at us in the 80s and 90s and be like, y'all looking funny. Just like now, I got guys today. I have to go to all the old heads, all the cats my age, all the brothers with the gray in their beards, and say, listen, don't front like you don't know what we was doing, how we was kicking it in the 90s. You go look at that movie, Electric Boogaloo, Breaking 1 and 2, and see the dances and the fashions they were wearing. Them tight ass shirts. You get a tight ass shirt that's 2 sizes too small. Then you cut out the midriff and you cut off the sleeves. And then you take off your curl bag and you spray your relaxer, your activator on your Jerry curl, and you swing in your hair and you out there on cardboard. I mean, but it was considered masculine. I'm not tearing it down, but I'm like, you should look at when you look at the skinny jeans today and go back and look at the spandex, the Grandmaster Flash, and you can put in any other rap group from that era. You can put in Curtis Blow, you can put in Busy B, you can put in MC Blowfly, MC Chill, and then we got to the 90s, and like when the early 90s, it was the grunge era. And y'all don't like to say this, but remember, when Biggie said y'all was grimy in the early 90s, remember, entertainers, that was the grunge era, and there was kind of a hip-hop grunge phase. Remember, Ice Cube was like, I drive a bucket, my hoopty. We was bragging about how janky our cars were in the 90s. We drove, I had to ride 5 deep, 20 deep with my homies in our bucket. That's what we used to call janky cars, buckets, or hoopties, or crackhead rentals. So all I'm saying all that to say is what's considered masculine, or what's acceptable for men to do, or what's not acceptable for men to do, or what's manly in one generation could be girly in the next generation, and then it could be both in different. It has no real masculine or feminine connotation, like sunglasses. Everybody wears sunglasses. Everybody smoke. Smoking used to be a manly thing, then it became a girly thing, and now it's nobody should smoke. It's just a turn off for everybody. So it's really hard to, when we say toxic masculinity, and it's very subjective, and it's something that evolves. And so you're saying, well, I don't want to be a toxic man, so I'm going to stop these behaviors. But what was okay to do, and what you could be considered non-toxic for doing a year ago, could be toxic next year. Like calling women females. I know men that call women females with no animosity. These females this, these females that. But now you're toxic if you call women female. And I don't call women females. I never talked that. It was kind of a southern thing. To me, it was. I always thought it was kind of a colloquial thing. Dudes from Atlanta and dudes, country dudes, just hey, these females out here, man. You know, ooh, let's go holler. They got any females in there? I always kind of thought that was just a regional slang. You know, like in New York, they call them. They call girls shorties. We didn't call girls shorties. We call short people shorties. You call a dude a shorty. Like, but when I went to New York, girls were shorties. I got myself a 40. I got myself a shorty. And so to me, I kind of looked at females like shorty or what they. There's so many names like chicken head. That was like, oh, that was an insult. Like calling a woman a shorty wasn't an insult. If you wanted to insult a girl, you call her a chicken head. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean? But anyway, now that's toxic. If you refer to women as female, it's reductive, it's offensive, and it's taken that way. Whether you mean it or not, that's how it's took. So stop it. So I kind of see these debates as about toxicity in certain regions. Now there's certain universals because a lot of times when you start to talk about toxicity, a lot of especially feminist sisters will jump immediately. You rape and murder. And the vast majority of men are not rapists. The vast majority of men will be born, live their lives, and die without killing anybody. I haven't killed anybody. And so of course, rape and murder is kind of the given. That's you don't get any, there's no really debate in that arena. There's no what? Okay, rape and murder. But anyway, when you talk about rape and murder, of course, rape and murder without discussion is absolutely wrong. But most debates, most women that will have to deal with men, toxic men, are not going to have to, fortunately, deal with the man trying to murder them. A lot of women might have to deal with rape, attempted or actual rape. Now that's kind of, but neither here nor there. What I'm talking about is in general masculinity, and even the most toxic men do not define rape and murder as an aspect of masculinity. Rape and murder is a crime, and even the men who are most defined as toxic would not say, hey, yeah, rape and murder is that defines manhood. That's not a characteristic of manhood. But the thing that men want to hold on to, that women say, hey, men, you should let this go. And men are like, nah, I'm a man. If I don't get to do this, then I'm less of a man. And even rapists and murderers will not say that, oh, my ability to rape and murder make me a man. That's kind of like an offset. But even though toxic masculinity does feed into rape and murder. And allow me to say this as well, as we define what toxicity means, what subjectivity means. There's a lot of subjectivity in there about what makes a man, and what makes a bad man, and what makes a good man, a good man. There's no hard and fast rules. And I know some brothers, I know, personally, I know a lot of brothers that want to be good men, that make a sincere effort to be good men. And even because the thing about toxic masculinity, most men engage, I would say all men that I know, including myself, are toxic from time to time. So saying that you are toxic masculinity is not a label. It's a behavior. So you can be a good man who engages in toxic behavior from time to time, infrequently or frequently, or a good man who has a toxic position or a toxic view. Toxic masculinity is real, but I think it's kind of redundant to say it because everything in the society is toxic. The economy is toxic. The educational system is toxic. The water that I used to make my green tea this morning, I'm pretty sure has some toxins in it. Every aspect of the society is toxic. So I had made the statement that toxic masculinity in a toxic society is just masculinity. But I digress. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So I acknowledge that toxic masculinity is real. It's a bit redundant to say it because everything is toxic. It's kind of easy to identify something as toxic. But let's go with that. And men do engage you don't have to be a toxic man. And a lot of brothers who are good men, I take care of my kids, I respect my black queens, and I do all, I'm a vegan. And a lot of us men who are generally good men, we're kind of hard to talk to. Because well, I'm not a toxic person. No, but you can still engage in toxic behaviors. That may or may not be tied to your masculinity. Because when you say, oh, your behavior is toxic or that behavior is toxic, I think it's kind of easier to approach that conversation when you got a man behaving in a toxic fashion, in a way that harms, contaminates, or obstructs other people. It's easier to say, hey, that's toxic behavior. But when you say toxic masculinity and I identify myself as masculine, then you're attacking me in totality. A lot of times. Even though that's not what it is, that's how it's taken a lot of times. But this is where we are. That is the terminology that is in the lexicon, but it's quite subjective. But let's talk about black masculinity unto itself. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get to the conclusion that there's no such thing. There is no black masculinity. And this is why. It's because one of the first things that happens when you come under colonization, enslavement, and oppression, if you read any of the books, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Wretched of the Earth, or the other dozens of the peculiar institution, there are dozens and dozens of books written about people who are enslaved, or people who are oppressed, or people who are colonized. And the first thing that happens under those conditions is you lose your identity. Remember, Farrakhan used to say, he probably still says, I don't listen to him anymore, but he used to say, which was accurate, we lost our religion, our culture, our gods, and many of us, by the way we act, we've even lost our minds. Well, Khalid said it too. Let me quote Khalid on that. Khalid Abdul Muhammad. So the first thing that you must do, you cannot oppress, enslave, or colonize a people whose culture is fully intact. It just doesn't happen. It's like trying to, even whether it's collective abuse or individual abuse, you'll find an individual man who brings an individual woman into an abusive relationship. He has to break her down, her identity. Her identity has to become a byproduct of his. I am his queen. I am his help me. And you find a lot of women in abusive situations that can't talk about themselves independently. They always talk about, well, what we trying to do, or what we believe, or what we seek. But women who are not abused, women are like, what I'm trying to do. And those, a lot of times you'll find toxic men, toxic masculinists, who are like, yeah, these women, they think they're so independent. They don't like women's independence. They're intimidated, they're offended, where there's a whole, first thing you have to understand about toxic black masculinity is that it doesn't exist. Because black masculinity doesn't exist, the black identity doesn't exist. And I know this is not comfortable for black people to hear. I'm a proud black man. I'm a proud black woman. I am an African. I'm a Yoruba, and all these things we work to define ourselves. That's why every other generation, from Negro to colored to black to Afro-American to African-American to African, all of the violence, there's a book called Uprisings and Downrisings that says that all acts of violence are a search for identity. And I know this is an uncomfortable, very uncomfortable thing for us to conclude. But say, well, how can you say black men don't have masculinity? I see men every day and they're masculine. Where does that masculinity come from? African men in the United States went from being chattel, being defined as a cow, a donkey, a pig, a tool, a beast of burden. Black men and women went from being defined as beasts of burdens to being defined as full citizens of the United States, with full protections of the U.S. Constitution. Under the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment gave us full personhood. And we went from a status of being forbidden to read, forbidden to make any type of autonomous decisions, from having any right to own property, to be in engaged legal or cultural marriages. forbidden to create our own art, to independently think, speak, or function for over what? For over 200 years. And we were thrust into citizenship. And the very next day, we were expected to get a job, buy property, pay taxes, and be good Americans. And so we had to make a quick shift. And as if you follow Killer Cholesterol Mike, he said that the best times for black people in the United States where we make the most progress in terms of literacy, in terms of progress, in terms of economics, in terms of our cohesion, our unity, our building up and restructuring ourselves into a viable population demographic within the United States, the best time for that was during the Reconstruction era. The first decade after the Emancipation Proclamation. We made achievements within that small window of time that we have not been able to sustain or replicate. He's not wrong about that. Now, having the facts about a reality does not mean that you're going to make a right assessment. Because basically he's saying we should go back and replicate the Emancipation era and the Reconstruction era. But Negro, do you not know they were able to flip it on a dime as soon as they recovered from the Civil War? And because at the same time that the Civil War was going on, the United States had ongoing conflict with Great Britain, Spain, and France. And so the United States was very vulnerable. And so the United States says, listen, let the Negroes marinate for a minute. We'll get back to them. We got to go deal with the South, the Southern Confederate States. We got to negotiate with the Confederates. We got to negotiate with the British, and we got to go negotiate with the French and the Spain to lesser degree. And once the United States says, hey, I'm secure, everything's right, okay, now we get back to the Negroes. And in that window of time, we thought, it's all good. And they came and flipped us and put us right back into neo-slavery and economic. We went from chattel slavery to economic and political re-enslavement. And then the same thing with the civil rights. And I know I'm going down a rabbit hole. I will get back to the point. Black folks was marching in the streets. And they were like, listen, we got the communists, the Chinese, and the Russian communists. And then we got the non-alignment movement in Latin America. And we got the decolonization struggle. So put the Negroes on back burner. Here's some affirmative action. Here's some civil rights legislation. Here's a voting rights bill. Here's some buses to go to bus your kids to the good white schools. Fall back, Negroes. And soon as they got taken care of the Russians, soon as they brought Latin America to heel, soon as they reinstituted neo-colonialism in Africa, they came back and boom, in mass incarceration. So we can't just look back and say, when was times good? Ooh, it was good back then. So what was we doing back then? We were wearing petticoats. And we was working hard, and we was listening to Booker T. Washington. So we need to go back to that time. That's not why times were good. That's what Del Jones called the oppressor loosens up to get a tighter grip. You readjust your grip, loosening up to get a tighter grip. So they let us wiggle around. If you got something in your hand that's wiggling around, and you open it, but you don't have a good grip on it, you open your hand slightly, and then it'll move. Sometimes it moves into a better position for you to clasp it. Loosen up to get a tighter grip. So he's right in saying it was all good just a week ago. Yes, it was good during Reconstruction. It was good during the Civil Rights era. But then it got real bad real quick, and we were not in a position to defend ourselves from the white backlash. So that's the misinterpretation. But I didn't even want to go down that rabbit hole. But I'm so sick of Killer Cholesterol Mike. Anyway, because a half-truth is worse than a full lie. So he comes up with these good assessments, but his analysis is off. His facts are correct, but his analysis of the facts is wrong, and his solutions based on that corrupt or warped analysis are all bad for us. But I continue to digress. Black men came off the plantation, and we immediately had instant identity. Add water and stir. Instant identity. So I'm a man now. I'm no longer chattel. I am a man. What does it mean to be a man? So you had to look at the people who have been enslaving you. Because again, in order for us to institute African manhood, we couldn't even go, even if we got a grant from Harvard and we sent our brightest minds back to Africa and study anthropological, language, cultural, and study all the arts of the African continent. Every continent in every country in Africa, except Liberia and Ethiopia, which again, a whole nother discussion about Liberia and Ethiopia. Every continent of Africa was colonized. So the Africans didn't have their identities intact. So the only thing we could learn from Africa is how to be colonized black men as opposed to enslaved black men. So the Africans were walking around in knickers and powdered wigs saying, "Good day, sir." Wearing monocles, chip chip hero, eating crumpets and drinking Earl Grey tea. The Africans were confused as hell. So even if we weren't able to do that, even though there were remnants of our true African ancestry, we needed generations of scholarships to not only discover what that was and reconstruct that destroyed legacy, that stolen legacy, but then modernize it and rework it and reconstitute it to fit a modern context. So we didn't have masculinity. There was no such thing as black African masculinity, then or now. What we did was adopt a bastardized version of white masculinity. I'm the breadwinner. Black man just came off, 2 days off the plantation, was turned into black woman, trying to enslave the black woman. Do as I say, missy. There's a lot. The reason why the color purple was so popular is because it spoke to us beyond just physical. There's certain genetic memories that were awakened in us. And trying to bring the woman, I can't control my woman. My woman's out there being any kind of way, dressing any kind of way, talking any kind of way. That's a bad reflection on me. So we saw the white man controls his woman. He dominates his family. And that's what I'm going to do. And you literally had black men started wearing the same clothes as the white man, carrying a cane. Back in the day, emancipation days, canes were stylish. And you get a mahogany cane with an hand-carved ivory handle on it. You was the man. So we look a lot of those pictures from the emancipation era. Black men were sitting up straight and stout, and they were just like their European peers. So if you really have an issue with black masculinity, you need to have a severe issue with white indoctrination, white colonization, and white domination of all aspects of our society, of our education, of our religion, because our religion is inherently sexist. So if you really want to fix black masculinity, what you have to do is destroy white domination over black men, women, and children, and destroy white domination over all black institutions. Get direct black control of black. And that's not going to fix it overnight, because we see what happened in South Africa. Even when black folks get control, we still have the psychological scars. So my main issue with this toxic masculinity rhetoric is that it's not revolutionary. Now, you tell a black man, stop being toxic, but you want him to be a good capitalist. There are a lot of the people, men and women, who mock toxic masculinity also engage in class mockery. You broke. You ain't got no money. You living in your mom's basement. You dirty, stinky, funky hotel. And I know when you look at hygiene in relation to poverty, some people don't have a washer and dryer in their home. I know. I grew up having to wash out my old underwear and having two pairs of socks and 3 pairs of underwear, and not having no washing machine in the home. And we go to the laundromat once a month when the welfare check came, and we filled up these big giant trash bags and throw them in the cart, or even have to put them in the cart and get on the bus and go to the laundromat where half the machines were broke in the ghetto. So when you call somebody dirty, funky, yeah, a lot of times they don't want to be. I spend many nights in the projects washing out me and my brother's drawers and socks and hanging them over the shower. Can't even go outside and play because your underwear is wet and you got to wait for it to hang dry so you can at least have clean underwear for school tomorrow. So at the same time, you tell black men you're toxic masculinity. Don't be toxic. You want them to achieve within a toxic system without being toxic. How? When the system only recognizes and rewards toxic behavior. You want me to be a non-toxic capitalist. You want me to amass wealth and to secure property and to secure the means of taking care of a woman, which in itself is a Western concept. You know, we took care of each other, Ubuntu. It was a mutual thing. It wasn't a man took care of the woman or the woman took care of the man. We took care of each other, multi-generational communal support. It wasn't no scorecard. How much money you bring in today? How many hours you work, what you bring to the table. That's Western. So you want us to be healthy and achieve in a toxic system that literally dictates and requires you to be toxic. Even if which I am, I'm very respectful of my wife. If my wife has a dream and ambition, it is my obligation to help her achieve that dream and ambition. My wife said to me, I want to get my PhD. I'm like, you go, girl, don't worry about these two little boys you didn't gave birth to. I got them. You got to go to class and you got to study. I put both these boys in a double headlock so they don't make a sound. I do whatever I can to support you and all you do. And people could look at Bro Diallo and Dr. Mingo walking down the street and say, look at that beautiful couple, that beautiful black, pro-black, educated black family. And people do that, especially when we were young. People like, yeah, black family, and cheer us on. But then I got to go out and make money to maintain this black family. And how do I make money? Exploiting other people, being a parasite, being a landlord, a slumlord of other people, go work for a multinational corporation, or maybe I join the military and engage in genocidal imperialism across the globe. Or hell, I don't leave my house. I join the military and I sit behind the screen directing a drone. So you can even be a non-toxic male in your intimate relationship, in your communal relationship, but you're a toxic individual when it comes to earning and sustaining yourself economically. As we know, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. Even my wife and everything we do to sustain ourselves involves the exploitation of other people. All these instruments I'm using to broadcast revolution have coltan in them and made by pernicious, environmentally destructive corporations. So there's toxicity in everything we do. The clothes I wear, made in places. Let's just see the hat I wore today. Oh, they don't have where it's made. Made in China. Made in China, and more likely than not in a sweatshop by a person who's underpaid, undercompensated, that doesn't have adequate, same thing, but doesn't have the right to strike. At least when our employers screw us over, we can say I quit and go starve in the street. They say they quit, they get beat, incarcerated, and forced to work. So the only real masculinity I see for black men is revolution. There's so much more I want to say, but my time is I have to wrap up my time, and maybe we'll pick this up Monday, talking about what is black masculinity was lost in slavery and colonialism, and every black man, even the kind, gentle black men, have a bastardized Western version and concept of what it is to be a man and to be masculine, to provide. And what we have to do if we want humane masculinity, if we want African masculinity, if we want a viable masculinity, is what we're going to have to do as black people is to reconstruct our masculinity. Redefine what it is and re-aim it. Because even in one of the main things, as Dr. Bobby Wright said, behavior amongst human primates is established and maintained by its consequences. One of the primary reasons why toxic masculinity persists is because it's very profitable. It's because it will help you to achieve. And even though on social media we condemn toxic masculinity, you take toxic masculinity into the corporate boardroom, you take it onto the football field or the basketball field, you take it into these streets like shoddy. Toxic masculinity is very, very profitable. If you want to be a good capitalist, you better be a toxic man. Even if you're a woman, you better adopt some toxic. And we don't even have to speculate about this. We know black men and black women who achieve in capitalism. Beyonce had to go overseas and set up a sweatshop in Bangladesh and use underage, malnourished workers to make her Ivy Park clothing line. But hey, everybody mad at Beyonce. Y'all remember, what's that lady's name that was on the morning show, Good Morning America? That crazy lady? And she had a fashion line for her daughter, and it was the exact same story. That was like 20, 30 years ago. It's the same cycle. Ain't a damn thing changed. If you want to be Beyonce, you better be willing to exploit the labor of third world sweatshops. You better be willing to sign a contract with the NFL that facilitates toxic and promotes toxic masculinity, jingoism, and imperialism, and has rapists and abusers on payroll. and turn these rapists and abusers into worldwide megastars, you better be willing to sit across the table and sign on the dotted line if you want to get ahead. So how can you defeat toxic masculinity and not fight against capitalism? And a lot of these sisters and brothers want it both ways. I know one sister, I was talking about toxic masculinity online. She had some issues. She said men are toxic because they want to be. And I asked her to support that assertion, and she didn't. She just like, I know, you're just toxic because you want to be. It's got nothing to do with societal. And said that I was making excuses when I'm trying to suggest solutions. But on her profile page, she had like literally billions of dollars of money. Like she wants to get a whole lot of money. She wants to get a whole lot of money. So I want to get paid and be non-toxic. When literally the economy is polluting the environment, polluting the minds of other people. So black masculinity is bastardized white masculinity. And in order to have non-toxic black men, we have to have revolution. The only way to be non-toxic, if you read Wretched of the Earth, it says your identity, your humanity manifest in your resistance. So if we can start to frame things in this fact to say, hey, this behavior feeds our liberation and attacks our oppression. This behavior validates our oppression. If we start to define things in that way, not only will we get better quality men, we'll get better quality food, clothing, housing, shelter, better quality overall social relations. But to define black masculinity and pigeonhole it, it lets a whole lot of other toxicities off the hook. And we really have to stop with this, you a broke ass nigga versus you're a toxic man. Because to be non-toxic means that you're going to struggle financially. If you have issues saying, hey, I'm going to get out here and do the right thing. I'm not going to prey upon other people. I'm not going to exploit other people. I'm going to try to do as minimal amount of harm and aggression towards other people. Then you've just knocked yourself out of 90% of jobs and income streams under capitalist system. You can't be a cop. You can maybe be a fireman, but really you can't even be a fireman because there's heavy discrimination in that. And firemen unions are one of the most racist unions across all countries. Across all counties in this country. So all I want people to do, because I believe you are valid when you say masculinity is toxic. There is toxic elements of masculinity. My main argument is if your analysis isn't holistic and your solution isn't revolutionary, you're perpetuating toxicity. And what you're going to do is you're going to have black men abandon toxic masculinity just to go be toxic capitalist, toxic Christian, toxic Muslims, toxic fathers, toxic femininity. Toxic gender neutrality. Toxicity, and I'm not even saying that to stop. Yes, there is toxic. And when your homeboys are acting out, catcalling, all of that, stand up and challenge them. Say, hey, man, this is wrong for the individual, and it's subversive. You're eroding our community cohesion, man. We got to start putting things in revolutionary context and terms. And I didn't get halfway through my notes. I probably spent a little bit too much time on that teachers union thing, but it's very important. Again, if you're having any ailment or any health crisis today, you definitely want to try to avoid going to University of Chicago, unless you're going there. But if you got some time, which I plan to do, go by and express your solidarity and support for the teachers union. And no, that's a few weeks. You're going to have to be standing in the street with the teachers. Right now, it's the nurses. Everybody's striking. I think if we had a general strike, we could overthrow capitalism without throwing one rock or shooting one bullet. The depth of our solidarity is directly proportional to the reduction in our suffering. Anyway, I got to wrap this up. I'm going, thank you for everyone who made a contribution on the super chat. I see y'all, and I definitely appreciate y'all, and I'm only going to be here because of y'all and my other contributors. And I will be back Monday morning. Be safe, Q4 Radio, AM 1680. Again, go check out that Wu-Tang. It's good, y'all. Go check out that Wu-Tang show. Like I said, I give it 4 black fists on the Wu-Tang. Maybe I'll start doing more reviews. But most of the stuff I like is corny, but this is something I like that I think is cool. Anyway, see y'all soon. Peace. Bro Diallo Show. I grew up on the crime side.